Hey there, ¿cómo se va and qué pasa? I'm your host, JayBo. Welcome to In the Pocket with JayBo. Today our episode features a multi-talented true Texas man from Corpus Christi, Mr. Joseph E. Garcia, a.k.a. Astro Joe. Joe has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering Business from Texas A&I, now Texas A&I in Kingsville, and an MBA from Texas A&M, the mothership in College Station, and has various Microsoft certifications. Look out. Joe has worked in the real estate technology industry for many years. He is a son, a husband, a family man, creator, entrepreneur, social media savant in many ways, and an amazing accordion and lead guitar player of the North Houston, Texas-based Bayou Junction Band. Ladies and gentlemen, busy. I'm glad he was able to make some time for us here. I have the pleasure of having on my show Mr. Astro Joe Garcia. Welcome to In the Pocket, Joe. So how are you doing?
Glad to be here, my friend. We've been waiting for this day, and the day has finally got here.
Yes, indeed. Today's episode is sponsored by Houston Hangout and Astro Joe Production. Houston Hangout explores the intersection of creativity and strategy, blending music, business, community insights to inspire meaningful, lasting impact. So, Joe, one thing we do here, and we're trying to make a staple, kind of a tradition with In the Pocket with JayBo, is we have like 5 icebreaker type of questions. And you're not prepared, and for our audience out there, Joe hasn't seen anything, he hasn't read anything, he doesn't know what's coming at him. So we're going to have a few little icebreakers here, which I do on all our episodes. So let's continue the lore of these 5 questions here, Joe. You ready?
Give it to me.
Okay. Explain to our guests, how did the nickname Astro get started? With Astro Joe.
I'm glad you asked that, Jay. I'm glad you asked that.
I've been knowing you a few years, and I've never asked you that, so now's my chance.
I like that as an icebreaker. So, I don't know if you ever looked in the phone book in Texas. If you ever looked up Joe Garcia, Joseph Garcia, Jose Garcia, or ever tried to look that up. Back in the days when there was still a phone book.
Right.
There was one too many Joe Garcias. My dad's name is Joe. My grandfather's name is Joe. And I still go by Joe.
Right.
However, at the time, I kind of came up with this name. I was like, I have to do something different. I was listening to a lot of talk radio at the time. And everybody had a kind of a nickname on talk radio. And I would listen to these guys who call into the Jim Rome show and all the local
talk radio.
John Granado and Lance Durland and all those guys. And I was like, I need something. I can't just be Joe Garcia. There's too many freaking Joe Garcias. So I said, what can I do? I love the Astros. There was a guy on the radio, his name was Cowboy Bill. He would always call in and complain about this, that, or the other about the Cowboys. Okay. So I said, I'm not going to be Cowboy Joe, because that's already been done. I'm going to make myself be Astro Joe. And a little bit more to the lore is, back in the day, which I know we'll probably get into some of this.
Oh, yeah.
There was this, I'd go to these places, open mics, and to different performances. Got my thing started at open mics. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little while. But There was a guy whose name was Johnny something or other, and he had just like a regular name. He wound up changing his name to Johnny Falstaff.
Okay.
And Falstaff, of course, anybody who's an old-time person knows about Falstaff beer. So he's like, I'm the beer man, I'm Johnny Falstaff. So I said, I got to find something as cool as Johnny Falstaff. So I said, why not? I'm in Houston, Texas, Astro Joe Garcia. And then that became my stage name.
I like it. It has a ring to it, man.
I have not changed it on my birth certificate yet. However, I'll take it as my stage name.
Like Marvelous Marvin Hagler or something like that. Astro Joe Garcia.
Exactly.
Now we know the story, man. I've been wondering about that for about 2-3 years now.
Short version. Yes, sir.
I love it. Okay, next question. This is a this or that type of question. Now we know, and the audience might not know, but all of us in the band know that big Dallas Cowboy fan.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's a this or that question. Roger Staubach or Troy Aikman? Which one?
I would say Danny White, but that wasn't one of the choices. Just kidding.
Right.
I gotta go with Troy, because he actually was the game manager, the man who made everything happen. Mm-hmm. Although, of course, you can make the argument for Roger. I'm going to just say I was in my prime when Troy Aikman was the man. And that's what made me kind of be the Cowboys fan that I am today. Although, for many, many years, my father's probably 10 times the Dallas Cowboys fan that I am, he swears by Roger
Number 12.
and Tom Landry.
Yep.
Tom Landry is the best coach ever as far as he's ever concerned. So that's another story for another day.
Right.
But I have to say Troy Aikman for that reason.
Troy Aikman, got
Yes,
it.
sir.
Both outstanding Hall of Fame quarterbacks as well.
Yes, sir.
And I was right in between that, really, because I was more of the Danny White, because I'm 60. So Roger was when I was a kid watching the Cowboys and the Steelers duking it out. And then as Danny White was in my teenage years, and then later on in my 20s and getting into my 30s was, Troy Aikman with the twins.
Yes, sir.
Emmett and Michael Irvin. So good deal. And you answered my why, so I didn't even have to ask you that. How about that? All right, next question. What do you wish someone taught you a long time ago? That's one of those
These
questions.
These icebreakers are definitely making me think about a few things. So, what I wish somebody would have taught me.
Anything. Music, life, sports, anything.
I just think about life in general is that, like, you don't have to worry as much as you think about what others feel about you. It's more of you need to be able to do what you think is best for you, and the rest of it will work itself out.
Right.
So I don't know that there's actually a word or a definition or a concept of that, but that's kind of some things that I just learned along the way, just trying to live through life, learn through my studies. Is at first I was always worried about what somebody was going to say, what somebody was going to think, and I still kind of do.
Yeah.
But in your mind, you just got to go for it.
Sure.
You just got to go for it. And I was always hesitant, kind of a little bit introverted in my own shell in some ways. Mm-hmm. I still am, but I've gotten a lot better at it. But I would say if I could tell myself that as a youngster, or give that same advice to anybody else. Nowadays, everything's out in the open. Everything's on the internet. You press the button and you think you know everybody just from what's out there.
Right.
However, in real life, it doesn't work that way.
We call it the polished version.
Exactly.
But I read a quote recently. Do you remember the old wrestler Diamond Dallas Page?
Yes, sir.
He had a good quote. He said, and he's helped a lot of old wrestlers, boxers, and physical health and mental health issues that they've had. And I got a lot of respect for the guy. I saw a little short documentary on him recently, but your answer reminded me of a quote that he said. He said, if you live in the past, you'll be depressed. Yeah. If you live in the future, you'll be full of anxiety because you're always worried about things. But if you live in the present, that's when you're going to enjoy your life the most. And one of the last things he said after that quote was, I wish somebody would have told me that a long time ago. And he said, because right now I'm the happiest I've ever been. And it just made me think of that quote when you said it, Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say. Living in the now, Jay. That's just the way, that's the only time you can live. You live in the now.
Okay, next question. I made this one a little easier for you. What is your favorite month of the year and why?
I guess I have 12 choices. I got 12 choices.
That's it.
This isn't a this or that. That's 12.
Correct.
I would probably have to say, for the most part, I'm just going to say, make it an easy one. I'm going to say May, only because it's the beginning of summer. Mm-hmm. It's not as hot.
Right.
It's not too cold. You're getting ready for everything to start happening in the summer. It's my birthday month. I'm happy. Every day is a celebration, as I always say.
However, bias. Yep.
You're almost halfway through the year. You're not quite into the heat. You're just making the transition, getting out of the summer, going in. I mean, back when you were a kid looking at school, you're like, man, May's the best month. I'm getting ready to get out of school. I just gotta coast through 2 or 3 more weeks of school.
Yep. Yes,
so it's kind of like that right now. I want to coast through before I hit my next milestone birthday.
Right. I love it. But yeah, school's ending. That's always an exciting time when you're young, and when you talk about these kind of things, you do have nostalgia come up from when you're a kid. A lot of things there. And I'll just every now and then I'll give my answer to the same question just out of fairness. And with me, it's usually November. because you're right in between, right around Thanksgiving's coming up. Christmas is right around the corner. You have that little break. But I like cold weather, so I'm a little different there. And my wife would definitely argue with me on that.
I was going to say that. I mean, sometimes, Jay, the answer really kind of depends on the mood. But my second choice was November for that same reason, because that's when the stuff's starting to cool off. The weather's starting to change
cooling.
A little bit.
You just had a little Halloween, Thanksgiving's coming.
Not too scared to live anymore from Halloween. Right. Getting into all the next holidays. So many holidays. Anyway.
All right, last question. You ready? If you could go back in time and have a conversation with any historical figure, who would it be? Not necessarily what you would talk about, but who is somebody you would just love to go back in time and talk to? It could be a historical figure. It could be a family member. It could be a movie actor. It could be a sports figure. It doesn't matter. But if you could choose one person to just go back and have a conversation with at a park bench, who would it be?
As always, you have to always have context to things. But I would just say in general, setting aside a family member, it's such a tough one. I'm an inner nerd.
Right.
I'm an inner nerd. I'm always thinking about just these different things about the universe and life and philosophy. This answer probably would have been different at different points in my life. But right now, I'm going to say
right now is what
right
we
now,
in the present.
We're living in the now, just like we said.
In the present. That's right. Current time.
I'm a weirdo. I would say Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein. The man was a philosopher.
Yes.
A physicist, a mathematician, and all of his discoveries and his way of thinking, he changed the whole course of the 20th century with everything that he did.
Yes.
So I wouldn't ask him questions so much about physics and all these other things, just like how do you even come up with these things? How do you sit down and create and
what triggers it?
What triggers it? What do you do to get people to think more out of the box? Because that's what the guy did.
Very much so.
He reinvented the world for us. You know, you can say it was for good, you can say it was for bad, you can make a case either way. But he basically changed the way that the world works with the way he repackaged and reinvented things that had been thought were one way for centuries. He literally changed the world. So we can have a whole podcast on what I think about Einstein and all his other stuff. We'll leave that for another day. But as just to have a moment with that man to me is he changed the course of history with all his discoveries and his way of thinking.
Absolutely.
And improving the scientific method.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Interesting answer, Joe. Yeah. Not what I would have thought, but interesting answer. And I definitely understand why you chose him. And knowing you like I do, I definitely understand why you chose him.
I mean, I have an answer as a musician I would talk to, as a family member, all these other things. There's just so many people you could. I mean, that's just a tough one.
Joe, I wouldn't have been surprised if you would have said, Socrates or Plato or Carlos Santana or, Jim Croce. I wouldn't have been surprised.
My second choice I'd probably say was Tom Scholz, the guy from Boston, because the man was a genius.
Yes.
He was an inventor. He was an electrical engineer.
Yep.
He designed his own amps. He designed his own pedals. He had his own recording studio. He tricked the music industry in the 70s into thinking that he hired a producer and he produced all the stuff in his basement in his house.
Right.
Anyway,
Brian May.
Brian May, an astrophysicist.
Astrophysicist, yep.
Neil Peart, the guy was...
Yes.
Anyway.
Yep, we can go on and on about that.
Another podcast for another day.
But Albert Einstein.
I'm going to settle on that one just for right now. Albert
Very
Einstein.
Good. Very good. Well, good. I appreciate you being forthcoming with honesty in those answers, and I can tell by just listening to you speak, you believe that in your heart. Those are interesting things to learn, and I like having those icebreakers as part of this show. So thanks for participating in that with me. So let's transition over to the interview. We want to learn more about Astro Joe Garcia. All right? So talk to me about where you were born, which I believe was in Corpus Christi, And then I believe your family may have moved over, and you may have to help me out here. Falfariza?
Well, I'll go ahead.
I'll let you take it from there. That's 3 or 4 or 5 adjectives there. That's too much for me right now.
It's a little bit. Some South Texas small towns are going to all come out in there.
Talk to me about Astro Joe Garcia, the little guy growing up.
So basically, I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Okay.
My mom and dad were working in Corpus Christi, Texas at the time, and I only lived there for a few months. My dad was born in Falfarias, Texas.
Which is pretty close to Corpus, about southwest, I believe, of Corpus.
As the crow flies, 70 miles, 80 miles as the crow flies.
Okay.
Just like all small towns, there's not just a one straight way to get there. You got to go this way, the other way, take almost a few little back roads to get here and there.
Take a left at the tree and a right at the rock. Yeah.
So for the most part, through my coming up years, I grew up in Falfarias, Texas, and so only a few months in Corpus, but basically all my formidable years, growing up, being a little kid, going through elementary, middle school, high school, all that stuff, was in Falfarias, Texas.
Okay.
Little old small town. I'd say it's halfway between San Antonio and McAllen.
Okay.
If you go up and down Highway 281, that's the big street there. That's the one that gets you through town, through the 3 or 4 lights we got there in that town. And I grew up in a small town. Everybody knew everybody.
John Cougar, right?
John Cougar, yeah. I was born in a small town.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So, a small town has its pluses and minuses for sure.
Yeah.
The good news is everybody, at that time, it was the 80s, so the economy was doing good. Everybody was doing good. The town was doing good. My dad was, he was the Brooks County judge there at the time, and my mother was a teacher over there. So
your dad was a judge.
He was a judge.
Okay.
So everywhere, somebody had some eyes on me. At school, my mom knew all the teachers. If I was going around town, well, my dad was a county judge, and then he also, between he and my uncle, they had a business there, a wholesaling business. Before Sam's and Amazon and all these things, my dad had a business there that they would supply all the different local stores. So you could order your Cokes, your cigarettes, your candies, all the things you sell at a little convenience store, whatever they have at Stripes and all these places
they would supply those.
They would supply that. So they had that in my town, Falfarias, and then they'd go deliver also to the next town over, which is about 10 miles away, Fremont and Dallas and Kingsville and Laredo. So they had anything between about a 1 hour radius. They'd go and supply. They had salesmen there. Nice, just a small business there. Sure. Probably 10 people working there. You had the accountant and the person who'd answer the phones, the ones who'd fill out the orders, and the drivers and all that. So I grew up around that. That helped me a little bit with my entrepreneurial spirit.
Business sense.
Yes, my business sense. And that business was started by my grandfather, who in the 1950s was a candy salesman. And he was working for a company that he was the reseller of the candies for South Texas. And he got inspired to start his own business there.
Okay.
And so he's like, instead of me being a salesperson, I'm going to do it myself. So he opened up his own business, said, not only am I going to sell candies, I'm going to do all these other things, because he knew all the people in the town. And so he started his own business with that, which then he trained my dad and my uncle to run the place. And then they all kind of ran it together for a few years before my grandfather passed away.
Okay.
And then my uncle kind of took over the business, and my dad was kind of the person who'd work with him. But I would go work there when I was a kid, a teenager, even before being a teenager. Mm-hmm. Kind of go work, help the guys sweep the floors, clean the bathrooms, all the stuff that nobody else wanted to do. Like, okay, Joe, it's your turn. You're going to do this. You got to learn to be a man now.
Right.
And so I would do that. And a couple other businesses. My dad was really the real entrepreneur that, like I said, he learned from my grandfather. Mm-hmm. My dad was, I would say, a little bit of a visionary. Not only was he a county judge there, a visionary. He opened up his own store, which was the Falfred's version of Stripes, called the Sunset Drive-In.
Okay.
And just your typical convenience store.
Yeah.
You know, your beer, your drinks, your bread, your eggs.
And I think people would go to these stores
coffee.
a lot more back in the day than they do now.
Totally.
Because everybody tries to do these big $300-$400 trips like a Costco or a Sam's, but those types of stores, man, we went to those a lot. You know.
So that store, my dad had an uncle who actually had originally opened the store. It was just a little shack that had a couple of refrigerators in there. And because my dad's uncle was also an entrepreneur himself. My dad's uncle had started out being one of the milkmen there in town. And then he said, well, I want to do my own business also, just like his little brother.
So the Garcias had a conglomerate going on.
Something
here.
like that was happening, right?
All right.
So he opened up he bought this little piece of property, put a couple of gas pumps in there back when, gas was, 69 cents a gallon.
Right.
And so we'd go there. We'd always talk to my uncle. Uncle passed away, and my dad wound up buying the land, and my uncle was just building a brand new building. This was let's call it a shack, but it wasn't a shack. But you had to go up the stairs. You go in there, and there was maybe a 20 by 30 foot little building in there.
Okay.
But he had just torn that down. He was building a brand new building made out of the cinder blocks and kind of, it was upscale. It was a brand new building. But he passed away.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't get to open his new store. So my dad went in and bought the store, and that was my job. I'd have to do every weekend. I'd have to go get out of the football game on Friday night. The next morning I was there at 7 a.m. Opening up the store. Sometimes he'd go with me. Sometimes he'd be like, oh, you're going to go ahead and go open the store. So that was something that really helped me out. Not only, number one, being an entrepreneur, but also just talking to people. I'd have to go. I had to balance my cash register till, get all the stuff restocked up, talk to all the vendors, talk to all the neighborhood people, the guys who come in the morning. Some of them will get coffee. Some of them would come in with a little hangover beer.
Right.
All the above. I mean, it's just some good memories. I'd have a radio there. We had a couple other people who had worked there. One of the guys who had worked there is the one who introduced me to Van Halen and to Rat and all these guys. He'd come in, he'd buy his new cassette. Hey, Joe, look what I just got here. He'd show me all the new stuff. So, like, when people weren't coming in, I'd talk and learn with him.
Ah, okay.
And my dad was also a visionary entrepreneur in that back in the video game days, my dad opened up an arcade. He made a deal with a guy a couple of towns over. I don't know how he met the guy. I'll have to ask my dad this story. I never have asked him this one.
Sure.
But he met a person who lived in Alice, Texas, which is 36 miles away to the north. And that was the kind of the big town, up the street. There was probably, 30,000 people there. Falfred had about maybe 6,000, 7,000 at that time. And so my dad said, I'm going to get on this wave of video games.
Okay.
So there was a building that was there that was kind of, I don't know what it was before. He went and bought it. He got a couple of pool tables. The person he partnered with, his name was Mr. Willis. That guy, he had all these arcade games: Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Joust, Tempest, Defender, Track and Field, Turbo, couple of pool tables. So my dad's like, I'm gonna open up an arcade. This is before there was all the the Nintendos and the Segas and all these things. The old days you had to go there. So again, I got to go work in that. Sometimes I was working at the other place. Sometimes I'd be working there.
Right.
But when that place opened, it was always packed. It was the only place in town that had that. Nobody had that.
So it had to be fun as well.
It was fun.
Fun times.
And again, I got to meet the guys who worked there. And at that place, I learned a couple of things. I learned how to be an arcade master. I got to play all the freaking games I wanted to whenever I wanted. And but the main thing that I loved about that place was they had a jukebox.
Okay.
And that jukebox, our man, Mr. Willis, he'd change them out probably. He would change out the records on there probably once a month.
Okay.
So he would take out the old ones And the little jukebox had I don't know how he did it. It had some sort of report that would say which songs got played the most, which ones got played the least.
Right.
So he would go in and he'd replace them. But I was able to just...
Little 45s or something?
Yeah, it's just the 45s was in there. So you could watch the little thing, move the 45s, put them in there, and the darn things would play. There's no MP3s, no cassettes, no nothing, no white tracks. It was a jukebox. So I learned about Foreigner, Joan Jett, The Police.
So is that when music really started coming into your life at that time? Because I don't think... Were you playing an instrument or anything back then? Or did you take band in high school? Or
So... Getting into the music part of it, that's a little bit... I'll just conclude by saying that was kind of the entrepreneurial part about that.
Okay.
And there's always a little bit more. Again, I'll probably say this more for another time. But as far as music, my earliest memories of listening to music was two things. My dad always kind of listened to all kinds of music. He really listened, of course, to kind of the regional Mexican Tejano music, which was the stuff that he loved. I mean, he knew a lot of the musicians from down there, from the local guys to the guys who were a little bit bigger on the scene before everything kind of blew up on there. Mm-hmm. He loved talking to musicians, and so the first memories I have were him listening. He was so proud the day he installed an 8-track player in his car. So he had a friend who had got an 8-track. So he's like, I'm getting an 8-track player also. So he got an 8-track player, and we listened to the 8-tracks in there. We had Nilsson, Schmilson, Nilsson in the Night. We had the Elvis 8-tracks, and of course some Tejano 8-tracks. But the one I remember listening to was Elvis, because in the middle of "We Can't Go On Forever" was Suspicious. It was right in the middle of that song. It was in the middle of the track, so it would fade out and fade back in between the freaking tracks.
That's true. I forgot about that.
There was that. And the other thing was I had this little AM radio. It was just an AM radio. It took 4 size D batteries. Mm-hmm. And all it had was AM. And it had 3 dials on it, like an on and off switch. So you turn it on. Then it had the volume. Then it had just the tuner where you could switch between the stations.
Right.
And Valparaiso had its own radio station, but it was an interesting station in that half the day, in the morning, it would play country music from, I don't know, I don't think they stayed up all night long. I think at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. it would start, and they'd pipe in the news. Back then it was like the UPI newscast.
Right.
So at the top of the hour, they always had the 5-minute news of whatever was happening in the world, and then they had a DJ. He played country music in the morning, and after 12, he'd switch it to Tejano music.
Ah, okay.
So it was like, okay, that was our radio station. You could call in and ask for songs, and they would actually talk, and you could talk to them and get on there and
to the DJ.
To the DJ.
Yeah, I love it.
And so that was kind of cool. And then there was the radio station in Corpus that kind of played a variety of things. They played country, they played rock.
Sure.
They played a little bit of everything. Then there was the news stations, and I would also catch a station from San Antonio. I could always catch that also. Depending if I had to turn the radio a certain way, and I could catch that station also. So it was 55 KTSA and 1360 KRYS. So KTSA was in San Antonio, KRYS was in Corpus.
Okay.
So, and they would play a variety. I remember listening to some Player and Billy Joel and all that stuff, and probably, I don't know what that was, 78 probably-ish.
Player. Baby Come Back.
Baby Come Back.
Yep.
Any kind of fool could see.
Yep, that's it, man.
So, anyway, that's my first memories of music and just like sitting down and getting into the stuff. And then I hit middle school, and my dad's like, "You want to play an instrument? You want to join the band?" And I was like, "I guess so." I wasn't sure because I was too shy. I didn't know what I wanted. My dad's like, "You're gonna join the band."
Right.
So I learned to play the saxophone. So in the 6th grade, actually it was the 7th grade, you get the saxophone. So it was at the end of 6th grade, you figure out what you want to do. Mm-hmm. The saxophone, the trumpet, the drums, whatever. I was like, I think I want to be a drummer. It's like, Dad's like, I think you're gonna go for some saxophone. So I got an alto saxophone, and there was a local guy in town, and my dad knew there was a sax player. So he wanted to give me private lessons.
Okay.
And I learned in band also. So the private lessons, he didn't really know too much about the notes. He's just like, I'm going to show you what to play. I'm going to teach you a few songs. They're kind of more the Spanish songs from South Texas. Las Gaviotas was the first song that I ever learned on the saxophone. And so that kind of helped me at least learn something and apply something. And I was like, okay, I like these songs. I like that too. But in the band, it helped me actually learn the music theory about rhythm and rests and the meters and quarter note, eighth note, 16th notes, and all these other things, and the time signatures and the cut time and the treble clef and the bass clef, and kind of how rhythms worked. So I learned how to read music at that point.
So this is in high school?
This is in middle school.
Middle school, okay.
7th and 8th grade.
Gotcha.
So in our band, we were always competitive. So you had I didn't get to do the marching band because I also played football as well.
Sure.
So I would play, and we'd go to different competitions. And at the competitions, they'd give you ratings, 1s and 2s, and all these other things. Right. So we'd always get straight 1s. We were always win everything. And and our band director was also, he would always want to play modern songs. So like instead of us doing like old marching songs, we would do like the Go-Go's. We got the beat.
Right.
Instead, we'd do the band version. So and then we'd also play like Neon Streets Are Bright on Broadway.
Yeah,
the old,
George Benson.
Is it George Benson? Or I don't know exactly who it was. One of them guys. But on Broadway Benson, was the song. So he was always throwing out kind of more contemporary stuff. And it's like, we're going to do this in the marching band. And I don't know where he'd find this stuff. It'd be another conversation with that guy to have. How did you find the sheet music for all this stuff? So somebody had to write the sheet music for all that, for the saxophone and the trumpets. And
it's like, how did he get it?
How did they even come up with that?
That's a good question.
Because back then, it's like, how would you even find that stuff? Like now, it's just like do a search and you find it. So that's kind of when I got into it. And I did that in the 7th grade and the 8th grade. So we always had summer band. And then I would also play football as well. So kind of trying to balance all those things. And I made the decision, though, when I got into high school, like, I don't know if I can do all this stuff. So I kind of let it go at that point. Mm-hmm. And I focused kind of more on I did two things. I did football and tennis at the time.
Okay.
But that's kind of how I first started learning about the musical piece of it. I learned the music theory from being in band for the most part. I didn't learn guitar theory or band theory, but I learned music theory at that point. So that was the foundation that I got.
And the importance of playing with others.
Playing with others. Yeah. And knowing how the parts kind of came together.
Sure.
Although I didn't see it all like that way at that time, of course. I was just like, I was just too worried about whether I was going to be first chair or second chair because I was always battling that out.
Sure.
And later I learned more about the guitar from listening to the music at the time, from Skid Row and Guns N' Roses and Poison and all those guys. My grandfather would play the guitar, and he played in different kind of musical things in the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And he also taught me a few things about the guitar. So he had a guitar. My dad also played a little bit of guitar. He didn't know too much about what the chords were, but he kind of knew what to do.
He knew the
basics.
Positioning.
And he could sing. So he always sang.
Okay.
And so I always had a few guitars around, but I didn't pick those up until I was probably getting out of high school at the time. I was probably 19, 20 years old. And my grandfather had a guitar, and he's like, I'll give you this guitar. Mm-hmm. So I had the ear for music, and I learned, I discovered Guitar Magazine, Guitar World, and
I remember Guitar World.
Yeah,
I remember that.
There was about 2 or 3 of them. There was Guitar Magazine, Guitar World, and 2 or 3 other ones. But what they were good at doing is they gave you what they call tabulature. Mm-hmm. So you'd buy the magazine, they'd have an interview, they'd interview whoever the guitar player was, the lead singer, whoever else. Then they'd have 2 or 3 songs where they would give you all the chords and the lyrics and everything.
Oh, wow.
And they would give you the music in there. Yes. Okay. So I would buy it really for that.
Right.
And in there it had the chord position, so how you put your hand,
your fingers,
how you put your fingers. Yeah. So my grandfather taught me a few things. My dad taught me a few things. They didn't really know too much about the music theory part of it. They just knew how to play and what to sing. So from the guitar magazines, that's how I kind of self-taught myself how to play guitar. So they have a little section that's like, here are all the chords you play, and then they have another little section at the bottom. Here's how you play the kind of the lead parts of it.
Okay.
So that was kind of what gave me the background on that.
Gotcha.
So
nice.
I think I'm probably a little bit too long-winded for whatever the heck questions you have, but
no, that's
I just love talking about this.
I like hearing about the foundation of how music came into your life, and it's really interesting that you had the foundation of your father and your I guess your grandfather, uncles, that they inserted that responsibility of growing up while you were young. Yep. To go along with just being a kid at that age and still having fun and, playing football, which is great. What position you played?
Well, depending on what year. So I played everything from offensive tackle to defensive tackle to linebacker to tight end. Every year I kind of played a different position.
So you were in the trenches most of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I was always one of those two guys on the line on either side.
Gotcha. And, but no, it's really interesting to hear. I like hearing about, if someone has a father or a mother or an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent that had a little musical background that was an influence on them. And that's obviously what's happening in your case, which is really, I love hearing those types of stories. So let's move on to when you went to college. So, I guess you went in, did you go in right after high school, or was there a little break, or what was the deal with that, going to Texas A&I?
Yes, I went and applied for different places. Okay. So I had applied for different scholarships at the University of Texas, Texas A&M, and Texas A&I. So Texas A&I University was kind of the hometown university that you'd go to. It was maybe 40 minutes.
Kingswood?
In Kingsville, Texas. So so that's kind of the halfway point between Falfurrias and Corpus Christi. So Kingsville was the other big city. They had a small mall there. They had a movie theater that had 2 screens. It was a big deal, one of those things. And of course they had the university. So they had 2 things there that made the town big, which was the university, and they also had the Naval Air Station Kingsville. So those are the 2 things they had before.
There. Okay,
Naval Air Station Kingsville.
Okay.
And so I wound up applying, and I got offered a scholarship to go to University of Texas. I got offered a scholarship to go to Texas A&I, and
scholarship for
to go for business school.
Okay,
business school.
Academic.
Okay. Yes, academic. Yeah, I wasn't enough of a football star.
I didn't know if it was music or football.
That would have been cool. Okay. I would have loved that, but I was too much of a scaredy cat to go to the University of Texas
in Austin.
It was too far for me. I was a small town kid.
Little fish in a big pond.
I was looking back, who knows, if I would have known what I know now, maybe I would have done something different. However, the stuff works out for however it works out. So
living in the present.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I wound up going to Texas A&I and studying there. I had a little house that my dad was renting for me there. I had a roommate there for a couple of years. I did go for the full 4 years. I was able to get out of there in 4 years. So I'd go in spring and fall. I'd go home and work in the summer.
Right.
At one of the whatever businesses it was at the time. Right.
One of the Garcia businesses.
Yeah. And I even would work. I even had a little summer job when I was in Kingsville where I was like a merchandise manager for Coca-Cola. I'd go and fill in all the promotional pallets and the stuff at the H-E-B there. Okay. So the H-E-B everything revolved around H-E-B at the time. So I worked at the library there. So when I was going to school there during the regular semester, I'd go work at the library. So I got to go work with the people who'd get all the new books would come in. I'd go in there. We'd have to put a little magnetometer in them so that way, whenever you'd walk out, if they didn't clean up. Beep, beep, beep. Sir, can you come back over here, sir? So I worked in the library there. Got to meet a lot of good people there at the library, and I just always worked in some way, form, or fashion. Okay. When I was doing something, that was kind of how I get my spending money. My mom and dad were fortunate enough and generous enough to help me through most of what the main living expenses were. But like, if you want to have some spending money, you got to keep on working. So I did. And I did it for the 4 years there. I didn't do too much music while I was there. I got my, like I said, this degree in engineering business, which was...
Man, that's maybe the third time I've heard somebody having a degree in engineering business.
Yeah.
That's a rarity. You don't hear that one too much. But it's an excellent mix, especially with... you obviously had an interest in engineering.
Yeah.
But you had a business, foundation being built from working, with your family. So
exactly, man.
It's interesting stuff there. So talk to me. We talked a lot about your dad and your uncles and your grandfather. Tell me a little bit about your mom. I met your mom before. Wonderful lady. Talk to me about your mom a little bit, the influence she had with you and things. Just give me a little bit about
So my mom was a teacher. She worked as a second grade teacher. As soon as she got out of college, had me and wound up going to college, and then she got a master's in education also.
Okay.
So she got her double degrees, but she was a second grade teacher the whole time through.
Okay.
And so again, like I told you, she had the insights with the teacher, so she knew what was going on one way or the other. But she was always kind of the steady hand on things, and her big thing was her saying was this that she had for me: you got to tighten your belt.
Okay.
Which is all about the disciplines. Like, you can do what you want, but at the end of the day, you got to tighten your belt when it comes down to it. That was her saying: tighten your belt. And so she was always the one who was reading books. She's always the one encouraging us to try and keep learning. I guess it was the teacher in her. So she was always, we'd go to the store. She's like, "Oh, you like that book? I'm going to buy it for you. You got to read it."
Yeah.
So she would do that. She would buy me these books, me and my sisters. I didn't mention I have my two sisters.
Okay.
I didn't mention I'm the older brother. So I was the example one way or the other, right?
Two younger sisters.
My two younger sisters.
Okay.
One of them lives here in Cyprus. The other one lives here in McAllen.
Okay.
And so she would always buy us books. We had the Reader's Digest subscription. So that was really more for her.
Yes,
that was more for her. So just a little old book, just a little book you can put in your hand, a little paperback. So we'd get that in the mail.
Little 3-4 page stories out there.
Yeah,
most of the
little,
time.
kind of the condensed
little
stories.
Almost, that's what I used to call it.
We'd get we had the encyclopedias, we had the mysteries unexplained. So she was always about learning, encouraging you to learn, encouraging you to read, encouraging you to go to, the one who disciplinary you to do your homework.
Sure.
Where my dad was more the fun guy,
The judge was the fun guy.
He was the judge. But he was the fun guy, but he was also the one who's like, okay, you also got to go to work.
Right.
So he was the one who made sure that, okay, you can do what you want, but you know what you're going to have to do in the morning, right?
Joe, one thing I can deduct here is that you really had a blessed childhood, man, with some very positive influence people around you that, they kept you on a straight and narrow. They taught you a lot, but they gave you the leeway to learn on your own, do some things on your own. But if you started thinking, outside the box, not in a positive way, you got to tighten your belt, baby.
Yeah.
Tighten your belt.
Tighten your belt.
So I like that. I'm going to remember that, man. So I know you have an MBA from Texas A&M, like we said, the mothership over there in College Station.
Yes.
So how long was it in between getting your bachelor's and then going on to your MBA?
So I did go through the straight 4 years.
Okay.
So I was able to do what I needed to do and get that degree in engineering business. And as you said, it was a unique degree. So they were like, what the heck is engineering business anyway? You can't go work as an engineer. You can't go do this. So I was like, it's just a hybrid. It's a hybrid. Right? I was taking electrical engineering and mechanical engineering and all these other things. Yeah. And so I knew all the engineers. I knew all the business people. But at that time, Texas A&I was in talks to getting into affiliation with Texas A&M. The Texas A&M it was an independent university when I graduated. And in fact, I was the last class to graduate under the name Texas A&I.
Okay.
They changed it right after that. The next people who graduated after the class after me was A&M Kingsville.
Gotcha.
So I was friends with the dean and the assistant dean and all that, because I had my scholarships.
Sure.
So I had to maintain my grades and whatever else. I did all that. And they encouraged me to apply for another scholarship at Texas A&M, the mothership. So they told me what the programs were. They're like, you can apply for this scholarship, you can apply for that scholarship. So I applied, and I wound up getting the scholarship to continue my education. Because at the time, I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I mean, I have this degree and I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I'm like, I better just try to keep on going to school.
Back to school.
I got to keep on going to school. So I was like, at least for that, I know what I'm doing.
That's a long and distinguished line.
Right.
That's enough.
And my mom and dad were like, okay, well, if you're going to get a scholarship, we can help you out a little bit more. We help you with your studies as long as you're working, you're doing good.
Doing the right thing.
We'll continue to help you. Sure. So I was like, okay. So I applied for this scholarship and I got this scholarship. And I had a couple of buddies who were going to Texas A&M. I ended up being a roommate with them for a little bit. And so I moved over there. To me, it was a big deal because I grew up in Valparaiso. Kingsville was only not even an hour drive away. And to go to Texas A&M was about a 6+ hour drive. So for me, I was getting out of my freaking comfort zone.
Right.
So I was like, man, I'm going away. I can't come home in an hour.
Big school.
It's a big school.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever, there was 30, 40,000 people there, at the time. So I went, and that school I was at probably had, I don't know, maybe 3,000 maybe.
Sure.
So it was a small school, Division II. I didn't mention this one for you since you're a football man. The home of Eugene Upshaw.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, Eugene Upshaw.
Yep.
And Darryl Green, the two most...
the big one and the fast one.
Exactly.
Yep.
So anyway, for that reason, that was my transition to go to Texas A&M.
Okay.
So I got an MBA in marketing from there. So I was there for 2 years, and I met a lot of good people, a lot of good buddies there. But at that point, I met some people who were musicians. Just became my friends. And there's a guy who had his guitar. He was in the singing cadets, and just struck up a friendship with him. He was the friend of a friend, basically.
Sure.
And so there was always somebody was always having a party somewhere. So you have a party at his apartment, and his apartment you'd have to go up. It was one of those apartments that was on stilts, and underneath it was the parking garage, and at the top was all the apartments.
Yep, very familiar with it.
So one time I going to this party, and he's out there playing some songs, and the guy's like playing some Poison, and I'm like, oh man, this dude playing some freaking Poison. It's like, I struck a conversation with him. He's like, yeah man, I play some guitar. I was like, yeah man, me too. So got to playing with him, and we wound up putting together a little duo between he and I, and that's when I learned about open mics, because he's the one who told me about. He's like, hey man, all we gotta do is learn 3 or 4 songs, and we go play them at the open mic. That's it. Yeah. Like they'll give you a free beer there, and you get to go talk to some other musicians, and the girls might talk to you too while you're there.
There you go.
So at that point, I had already kind of learned a little bit about the songs, and I was comfortable enough to kind of play, but I wasn't comfortable enough to sing. But the good news was he was a singer. So we looked at each other like he was Bono and I was the Edge. So
okay.
I was trying to emulate the Edge, But anyway, I was doing that, and then I never really had too many problems with school, so I was able to go and there I also wound up working at the library over there too, because I told them, hey look, I worked at this library at this other place. It's like, hey, maybe you guys can hire me over here. So met some good people at the library, so I had the insights over there. I always knew the places to go and study and get the right tables and all that too. And I had a good time there. I was there for 2 years, and I wound up getting my MBA in marketing, man. So
nice, very good. Well, congratulations, man. Yes, and it's easy to tell that you have one in marketing and engineering business too. So tell me about, and just real quick, tell me about how you met your wonderful wife, Lena.
So the story continues from Texas A&M. So I wound up doing in the summer between my 2 years I was there, I wound up doing an internship with HEB in San Antonio.
Okay.
And I did 2 parts of it. One part was I worked at the distribution center. Mm-hmm. So I worked with kind of figuring out how they managed to do the routes for all the stock, the trucks to go stock all the different stores they had. At that time, they were still growing. They weren't as big as they were now. And so I spent half the summer there at HEB and half the summer at the distribution center and half the summer at the other. They had just come up with a new concept, Central Market.
Okay.
It was the first one they ever opened. It was in San Antonio. So I spent those 2 summers there, which led me to thinking, I worked at a wholesale place with my dad and learned all about that, even though I had this background in engineering business. So I liked HEB. So I wound up interviewing for jobs in the retail store management.
Okay.
Which I'm going to get to the answer for the question you asked me. So it all kind of leads up to it. So there was a new company that had just come into Texas called Venture Stores. And they were a company that was founded by the founders of Target. They did a spin-off. They started out in Chicago and in St. Louis. And they got a cash injection. They're like, we're going to expand it to Texas because that's the big market now.
Sure.
So they wound up opening some stores in Houston and in Dallas.
Okay.
And so they were recruiting big time. So they sent over these recruiters to Texas A&M. And I interviewed with not only retail, I was talking to some different financial companies and some other things, trying to get a job. I was like, it's going to get a job.
Right.
But they had all these bigwig executives from Venture Stores there. And they told me, we're going to hire you, Joe. You're not going to be a manager. You're going to be an executive trainee.
Oh.
So I was like, oh, man.
Okay.
I'm on the executive trail. So they said, but before you become an executive, you got to spend some time in the stores.
Yes.
Said, where do you want to go? I said, well, kind of like Houston. It's kind of down the street from here. So I did interview with HEB. They made me an offer to go to Laredo. And I was like, oh, man, I don't know about no freaking Laredo.
Yeah.
I was like, man. So I was like, Houston or Laredo. And those are the offers I kind of had. So I was like, I'll take the one in Houston.
Right.
So I wound up going with Venture Stores. So I wound up training at a store here in Houston where I met lots of other people, lots of other managers. Every store had about 4 or 5 different managers. Mm-hmm. And one of the managers at one of the stores was a young lady named Lena Payne.
Okay.
So after I went through the training program, I got assigned to a store. And I won't say in a way, she was my boss at the time.
Okay.
She was the operations manager, and I was the merchandising manager. So I knew her there, and we had some adventures of whatever else you want to say, just being in management together.
Right.
We didn't have an initial spark, though. But long story short, that company started having some problems. They didn't have enough money. They didn't know what to buy.
Right.
Whatever else. So I lasted there about 2 years, and I wound up leaving the place. And I went to go work at another place, Babies R Us, which they were just expanding at the time. Mm-hmm. And one of the old managers that I worked with at Venture had gone over there. Said, "Hey, Joe, come on over here. You can be my assistant. Because you'll be the next in line, for the next store." So I wound up getting a promotion. I wound up being a store manager. I ran my own store with them. But they wound up getting bought out. And again, a long story short, to answer your question, I made one more switch in retail management. Mm-hmm. I went to go work for Old Navy.
Okay.
So at the time, Old Navy was big. They were owned by the Gap. Everybody wanted to have the T-shirts, all the stuff.
The mall and all
the
that
mall.
Stuff. Yeah.
It was cool as anything, man.
Yep.
But retail was retail, man. I did it for about 5 years, and I was like, man, I got to work late nights. I got to work early mornings. I got to work weekends. Yeah. I mean, I made good money. Met a lot of fun people. Everybody there had a good time. Got all the youngsters and the managers, and everybody was all good. But I was like, I can't do this. So when Venture folded, Lena went to go work for Old Navy. Lo and behold, she had seen one of our former coworkers at a doctor's appointment, and asked the former coworker and said, "Well, where are you working at?" And the former coworker was working for me at my other place. So she said, "Yeah, I'm working for Joe now over here at Babies R Us now." And Lena's like, "Oh, really?" She said, "I hadn't seen Joe in a while." So at Old Navy, you had to do every 6 months you had to give a list of referrals. So people you want for them to call and interview.
Okay.
So Lena's like, "Oh, they asked Lena for like the week before, the week after that she'd gone to the doctor's appointment. She's like, I'm going to put in Joe's name. So she put in Joe's name, and Old Navy wound up calling me. And that's how I got the job at Old Navy. They called me, and I was ready for a change. So
sure,
I got a big raise, whatever else, to switch from one to the other. So I wound up crossing paths with her. I worked at a store in Pasadena, and she worked at the one in Spring.
Okay.
And we had to order things. You had to order hangers. You had to, order different supplies.
Right.
And so I would talk to her, just in passing, hey, how was the sales going, whatever else. And one time my store was running out of hangers. So I was like, man, I got to find another store. I got to borrow some hangers. Like when we get the hangers in, it's like I'll just go back, get a couple of cases of hangers from them, and then when our cases come in, I'll just give them a couple of cases.
Right.
So we did that, and we just got to talking, and we both were just like, I can't do this no more with no retail anymore. This is too much. She's like, I've had enough. She had done it a couple of years longer than I did because she graduated from college early, and
sure,
and she did it. That's a whole other podcast that's on her.
Right.
But so we got together, and in our shared getting tired of retail, I was like, hey, why don't we go have some coffee? So we wound up met at a Starbucks and had some coffees, and Starbucks right there at Veterans in 1960 for anybody who's familiar with Houston. That was our first quote unquote date. And so we wound up from there kind of hitting it off. And then we wound up having our first official dinner date at the Papacitos there at Willowbrook.
Oh, nice.
And from there on, the rest just kind of became history.
That's it?
She wound up leaving. We both wound up leaving retail. I left to go get my Microsoft certifications that we talked about.
Yes.
And she wound up leaving to go to law school. And I'll just leave it to you like this before we move on to the next topic. I needed about 3 months to get all my different Microsoft certifications at the time. And she needed 3 years to go to college. So she said, Joe, I'll help you out for 3 months, but I need you to help me out for 3 years. And that, of course, I was like, I'll take this deal anytime.
Right.
So long story short, that's how we wound up meeting. It took us a few years to kind of connect, but when we connected, it was just magic. We're like, we had a vision to want to do some things that were different, and we just had that shared background of.
Well, I can tell you, Lena's a very impressive lady. My wife and I, Becky, we're really glad to be friends with you guys, and she's a treasure for sure, no doubt about that.
I'll second that, bro.
She tells it like it is, and that's what I admire the most with Lena.
Yes,
she just tells it like she sees it, and she's very observant. That's what I like. So let's transition. Let's transition back a little bit to the music and Houston.